Oh, good morning from New Jersey and from North Carolina. This is Teresa Spangler, Future Forward session, and I'm really thrilled today to bring Future Forward Jill Johnson to the table, who is the CEO of the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership. Jill's a champion of small business inclusion within economic development landscape. She is working on innovative solutions to address the challenge to access to capital and barriers that face women of color entrepreneurs, very committed to women of color entrepreneurs and really trying to help those women get connections, gain the influence they need, help with funding, and really think about how they can succeed. And I think this is just such a really important topic, which for everyone listening, we will share links at the when we actually post everything. But I also want to introduce two of her teammates and let them introduce themselves. We have Lorianne Alewa and we have Jeremy Johnson. And I'm going to let Lorianne, why don't you take a quick stab and introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, everybody. I am very happy to be here. My name is Lorianne Alewa, and I have the wonderful task of publicizing all of the programs and magical moments that the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership creates through its key programming and events. I am the public relations manager, and there are so many wonderful stories to tell. IFEL entrepreneurs are changing the business landscape. They are changing the world. And I cannot wait to share some of those wonderful stories with all of you.
Excellent. Jeremy?
Good morning, Teresa. Thanks again for having the Institute on today. My name's Jeremy Johnson. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Technology, and I have the privilege of working with a great team at the Institute who for 20 years has been really reaching out to entrepreneurs and making sure that they get access to knowledge, networks, and capital.
Awesome. I have to tell, especially Lorianne, you mentioned the word magic, because one of my meditations this morning was the magic of synchronicity. So this is going to deliver magic synchronicity to our audience. But I want to talk about that a little bit. The magic of this all. You've been in the efforts of doing this for 20 years, and that tell us about the strides you feel like you've made in that 20 years, and let's talk a little bit about why you do this.
Well, the story really starts with my parents, actually. And in case anyone is wondering, yes, Jeremy and I are sisters. So we share that lived experience of my parents actually having a newspaper publishing business, and they had a business for about 20 years. And so we had the opportunity to grow up seeing the ins and outs of being a business owner. And the real story, it looks very glamorous to have a business, but we were there the late nights with our mother, putting the newspaper together, driving the newspaper to the press. Those were back in the days when before things were digital. We had to actually drive, physical printouts to the press. We experienced the times when the money didn't come in the way that they were expecting. You had to invoice the advertisers. The advertisers didn't necessarily pay on time, but they still had payroll to pay.
Yeah.
And they had a team and people whose livelihoods depended on them. So we had a very early opportunity to see what that was all about. And when my parents decided after 20 years that they wanted to move on to, having a life and enjoying themselves a bit and move away from the newspaper, the thing that I think was really unfortunate is that they had not built the business in a way that they were able to extract the value that they created. And so after 20 years, they shut the business down. And to me, that was such a loss, not only the newspaper itself in the community, but it was a loss in terms of a wealth generating opportunity. And this is the thing, Teresa, that we really try to stress. And the reason that we created, my father and I together created the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership, was to help more people, especially people of color, women entrepreneurs, to think about not just starting a business or being in business, but to use their business as a conduit for building wealth.
You know, you're speaking, I think is so important to focus on that, because there's kind of two continuums I see. They have those that go day to day and they're not building on that wealth. And then you have the others that think, I'm going to go do a big exit. And so you have this middle ground, which is where the messy stuff is. And that's where the focus needs to be. Can you talk a little bit about those two continuums and how you fill that gap?
Sure. People focus today so much because of the media, essentially, on the tech companies. And we hear about the tech exits, the Ubers and the Googles and, these big billion-dollar valuations. But the reality, Teresa, is that there are small businesses that are bought and sold every day, dry cleaners, a newspaper, a print shop. We just had one of our entrepreneurs who sold her home healthcare business. So there are all types of businesses that are bought and sold every day. But in order to do that, you have to build the business in a way that the business is not you, that the assets of the business, that the business itself, because maybe someone wants to step in. There's a guy that I know who had a printing business, and he had created such great systems and processes that someone bought his business who wasn't even from the industry. They were essentially a financial buyer. So it's something that people really have to think about in advance. And again, all businesses, from the smallest to the largest. But here's the thing is, even if someone does not end up selling their business, or maybe they say, I don't really want to sell my business, so Jill, I'm tuning you out and not listening to that. Think about this. How much angst does it cause so many entrepreneurs just to take a 2-week vacation, right? If you ask them if they can be away from their business for 2 years, it causes them all this anxiety. And so if you build your business in a way that it's able to operate without you, at the very least, you're able to take a vacation. And again, another thing to think about is if something happens to you. We went through a whole period where lots of people were very sick for periods of time. If something should happen to you, your business would still be able to operate as your primary source of income. So this is just something that we recommend that everybody take a step back and think about how you can build your business to operate without you. It will lead to wealth in one way or another.
So can you talk a little bit about the how, and maybe Jeremy, this is something you can talk about, or Lorianne, how do you do that? Through programs, or what's the mechanisms that someone would get involved with you?
So I'll take that first and then they can chime in. So the how is through a very high touch, hands-on model. There's lots of training that's out there. There are a lot of workshops, a lot of how-to videos. For a lot of entrepreneurs, it produces information overload. They do not know where to turn. It's too much. They don't know what to do first, second, or third. And so what we try to do is help them to first understand what it is they need. What is the real barrier? A lot of people think, oh, I just need money, but there are a lot of things that you need before you even need money, or at least in addition to. And then we help them figure out, okay, what's the plan? What is it that you need to actually do once you know what the problem is or what you think the problem is? And then to find the resources to put around them to actually the expertise to help them to implement. That implementation part, that hands-on piece is so essential. So many business owners are not able to translate a plan into action because they just don't have the expertise. And if you don't have the capital, you don't have the resources to hire the experts that you need. Jeremy, why don't you talk a little bit about even your experience, because we have team members and we really try to encourage our team members to work with businesses directly as well.
Definitely. And that's really an important aspect of working at the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership, is really working one-on-one with the organizations and businesses. So what we have is our Small Businesses Needs Us initiative, which basically creates a nationwide volunteer community of folks and professionals who are passionate, enthused, and also experts in their areas. And what we do, I would say I am one of those that help entrepreneurs on a range of topics. And those meetings could be one-on-one meetings, they can be group meetings. So for example, some of the areas that we focus on include website review and
Financial
improvement.
projections is a big one.
Right, financial, and right, that's huge, right? Understanding those financial statements, right?
Yeah.
That leads to a whole host of other access to capital,
Yeah.
as well as competitive review, and also just marketing, right?
Yeah.
Marketing is huge for small businesses. We know that small businesses are so busy running their business, they have very little time to think strategically, and also just to get a fresh opinion of, you know, what they're doing, and to have a sounding board.
That
Teresa,
sounds
we
great.
have
I
a
mean,
volunteer community right now of nearly 800 business professionals
that's
that are willing, you
wonderful.
know, people who are willing to volunteer their expertise in support of a small business owner.
Yeah, I find a lot of times that entrepreneurs may have the domain expertise, but when you get that service or product to the door, it's like you open the door and there's a whole world out there. What do you do, right? Where do you go? How do you go? So your mentors and mentorship and programs are helping them navigate the world outside.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we actually don't refer to it as mentoring.
Okay.
In terms of what we do, we really focus on capacity building.
Okay.
Mentorship can sometimes suggest Teresa, what do you think is the problem? Okay,
Yeah.
well, you know, here's what I did. Good luck. Why don't you go, you know, and let's talk again in 6 weeks.
Sure.
What we focus on is that capacity building. So it's, Teresa, let's figure out what the problem is. Okay, what needs to happen now? Let's schedule 3 meetings so that we can walk through that and make the changes to your website. Why don't you move this here and do that? And, you know, here's another resource that you can use. It's really much, much more tactical and hands-on in implementation.
Excellent.
The other thing that I just like to point out, you know, the connections that we create through this work are critically important, we believe, to helping to remove systemic barriers that exist for entrepreneurs that have been historically excluded.
Yeah.
It helps people to get to know each other.
Sure.
And, you know, maybe Lorianne can share a little bit of her experience and insights about just, you know, what she has learned and experienced herself with understanding more deeply the challenges that entrepreneurs face from historically excluded populations.
Sure.
The one thing that I do want to speak to here first is action, intentions, and being deliberate. That's where IFEL really differentiates itself from so many other programs out there. We are deliberate and intentional about what we are doing to help entrepreneurs and historically excluded populations
So your
succeed.
intention is determined to make them successful, help them realize success on that journey.
Exactly. It's not just talk, it's action. I've had the occasion of speaking to many of our entrepreneurs. They all have amazing businesses. It is just amazing if you put 3 or 4 of these founders and entrepreneurs in a room, the combined power of their talent and their knowledge. I mentioned when I introduced myself, they are changing the world. And yet, over the last few years, particularly with COVID and long COVID now, so many of them ran into problems like real estate issues with their space and
Yeah.
terrible difficulties like that. things that could virtually shut a business down.
Sure.
And here's where our programs really speak for themselves, and the connections that Jill was just talking about, and the social power that IFEL has, combined with all the skills-based volunteers that we have. They
Yeah.
step up. They're highly connected people who are powerful in their own right, that can open doors, that can solve these problems. And that's what our volunteers do.
I mean, I
They
think that's
step right up.
probably,
They make it.
yeah, that's probably the number one thing that I hear, that I need help with connections. I need help, getting to the right people. And
Mhm.
many times they've maybe not even identified who that right person is. Do you help with that? How do you help with that? How do you help them identify those right people?
Well, a lot of times we're thinking about their business when we're not even with them.
Yeah.
And so, our objective is to know their businesses so intimately that we're able to look for connections when we're out there doing the work that we do. I have had the good fortune of having some tremendous opportunities throughout my lifetime. I
Yeah.
started my career at Goldman Sachs. My undergraduate degree is from Harvard.
Yeah.
I've been in lots of spaces and lots of places. And I do feel that my network, utilizing my network, I am able to help to get more people into our community at IFEL. And through that community, we're able to open doors. When you have those know, like, trust relationships, that's when
Absolutely.
you're able to call in other people and say, hey, so-and-so, one of our entrepreneurs needs this support. Can you help?
Yeah.
And people are glad to do that. And in general, most people want to help, right?
Yeah,
They
I
just
agree.
don't necessarily know who to help or what the help is that's needed. So when there is that intention that Lorianne mentioned on both sides, I want to receive help. I'm open to getting help, and I want to help someone. We facilitate and we bring those two together to really make that magic happen.
So can you share a few examples of maybe some barriers people faced, and what was the entrepreneur's character traits that helped them drive success through that? And how did you help them realize those things? Is that a fair question?
Sure. Well, the character traits, I would say that starts with perseverance.
Yeah.
So we're going to just take it as a given that someone has a solid business concept that
Right.
is implementable. I think for a lot of people, though, that there is a question there, and that's something that I encourage all entrepreneurs to figure out and get outside advice and opinions, because there are a lot of people that are moving through their business without having a real business. And that starts with the financials. So let's take as a given that you have a business that is viable. You then have to have the perseverance. It's hard running a business and growing a business, no matter how vast your resources. If you have very limited resources, it's going to be harder. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to start on a smaller scale. You have to be willing to knock on more doors. You have to be willing to hear lots and lots and lots of no's. And you have to figure out how to keep powering through. That's the thing. And I think that that's one of the things that we're really, really, really good at. And partially even because that's what I saw. That's what Jeremy and I saw from our parents, powering through, even when they didn't have all the resources that they might have
Sure.
thought that they needed. So we try to help people to figure out, how do you just create a little bit more runway for yourself? We believe you can fly, but if you run out of runway, you're just not going to get to that takeoff. So our work with a lot of our entrepreneurs is around creating that runway and helping them to get to a place where their business is more fundable.
You and Jeremy, with your family's business, I guess you probably saw 2 or 3 things looking back now. What could they have done? What are those 2 or 3 things that maybe resonate with other entrepreneurs that they could have done to build a wealth building business that could have been acquired? Are there 1 or 2, 3 things that you could pinpoint?
Oh, I might start with that. I really started and worked on the editorial side of the company. And I think it was so important to set up processes. And again, I think Jill mentioned this so that you can actually work on expanding your business, right? So that is so fundamental to what a business is creating processes where you can step away.
Excellent.
I think
That's
those
fun. I
processes
think
are
absolutely foundation.
the processes are really at the foundation.
Yeah.
Because if you're working in the business so much, you never have the opportunity to work on the business.
Right.
And we always hear that, business owners always hear that, work on the business, not in the business. But do they really know what that means? It
Yeah.
means that you have the ability to step away. You can go to training sessions. You can go to networking sessions. If you're constantly finding yourself saying, oh my gosh, I don't have time for that. Oh my
Right.
goodness, I can't take that time away from the business. I don't have time to read a book to enhance my knowledge about my industry, then you are working too much in the business.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, we understand that that's easier said than done, right? If you don't have the resources to hire experts and hire a team, most businesses, especially Black-owned businesses, are solopreneurs. So if you don't have the resources to hire a team, that whole thing of work on the business versus in the business, you're kind of like, well, who would be working in the business then, right? And so again, I think that's where we try to use that hands-on, high-touch approach to provide these capacity building resources that can maybe just help you tackle one thing that can get you to hiring a virtual assistant for a few hours, and just little by little start to build that capacity to be able to move away from working in the business all the time.
So one of the things I think I'm loving this because it's so important is that you've not mentioned anything about funding, because first entrepreneurs, especially if they're in early stage or first time entrepreneurs, always think, I got to go get funding. We already know that 2023 is going to be very challenging for anybody's funding, even if they already have a business. What do you see for 2023, and how do you sort of guide? What tips would you give entrepreneurs this year that you're in terms of trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, there are a couple things there regarding funding, and I have mixed feelings about focusing so much on funding. It is super important and it's needed. And I encourage people to understand the economics of the business that they are starting. If they are trying to start a business, understand the economics very thoroughly.
Sure.
How much it will take to operate the business, how much you need to start the business. And I suggest getting that money together first before you start. Do not quit your day job. It's easier to get a loan for your business when you already have a job. So get your money together. I often recommend that people keep their job. If they don't have that personal savings, if they don't have the ability to get friends and family money, keep your job. Now, again, there are a lot of investors who might say, and we've heard this, I don't believe that you're 100% committed if you don't quit your job, right? If you're not working full-time in your business. Well, the flip side of that for entrepreneurs who are undercapitalized is that if they quit their job, often they're putting not only their business in peril, they're putting their personal situation in peril. So we advise, keep your job. You become the third or fourth employee to the business rather than the first. And that way, you're actually assured that your business can operate without you because you're starting it from a position of operating without you. So that is one approach. If you do not have capital, right? Again, a lot of times access to capital focuses on, improve your credit, get together, well, again, credit's not going to change overnight. And it's probably not going to change in the time frame in which you are trying to start your business or grow your business if you are already in business. So there we say, again, connect with groups like ours. There are CDFIs, community development financial institutions that are in almost every community. Those can be a great resource. There are crowdfunding platforms now that make it much easier to go out and raise capital. Now, again, you still have to do work with those things.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
like, just a magic pot of gold sitting there, but you have to do work. But those platforms do exist. Also, really figure out how you can operate on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
You need to understand the money that you need to grow the business, but have your, kind of scenario 1 and scenario 2. If I have this amount of money, what will I do with that to get me to that next level? If I have this other amount of money, what will I do to get to the next level? But you need to have a plan with that capital, because one of the worst things you can do is get just enough money that you
Need more money.
that you have debt, but you don't have enough to grow the business.
Right.
So you don't want to be undercapitalized in a way that, again, it puts you in peril because you're taking on debt that doesn't allow you to grow enough to repay that debt.
Right. No, I think it's so important. And I do know, like, communities, and especially in North Carolina, that we have a lot of focus on monies going to rural areas that weren't getting it before, to minorities that weren't getting it before. There's a lot of focus over the last 5 years that are trying to put more funding together for those initiatives in those regions. So it's a good point to, bring that up.
So,
So
Teresa, there's a lot more talk about getting money to those specific groups. Whether or not there is more money getting to those groups, I think is still up for debate.
And that's again, a long game for you guys.
Yeah, that's something that we really focus on again. And I would encourage people who are looking for capital, connect with your local resources, connect with us sooner rather than later. So you're not wasting time talking to investors or capital providers that just are not a fit. You need to get to the right people sooner rather than later, understand what it takes. You need to have your financial house in order, be able to show your financials before you even start down that path of raising capital.
So I do want to talk about some of the things that you're seeing, but I don't want to forget that you also have a conference coming up, do you not, in March?
We do, and we call it a summit, actually. And it's our Women of Color Connecting Summit. And this will be the 5th year. I can't even believe it. This will be the 5th year, the 3rd year of it being virtual. So it's a virtual event. It's over 3 days, March 7th through the 9th. And we invite people to join who are entrepreneurs who want to experience women of color connecting, but also, and most importantly, it's an event for people who believe themselves to be allies and champions of women of color. And so it's learning how to be that ally, investor, or champion that is really putting their actions and their intentions where their talk is around DE&I.
And we'll make sure that we have links to that summit when we launch our podcast here. So you'll be able to get those links in the bio section. So what are some success stories? Can you share some lessons learned and in some of the success stories that you've been able to help?
Yeah, I'll start and then everyone can chime in, because I think we've all touched this one particular entrepreneur. She's an amazing entrepreneur who's been part of the IFEL community for a very long time. She has a company that delivers home-cooked meals for seniors and disabled adults.
I love that.
And she is so passionate about her business. And, she tells the story that they went to someone's apartment one day as a senior, and that person actually ended up revealing that they had suicidal ideation. And because she has drivers that take the meals to the home, the driver called in and they actually called in, got help for that person. You know, their meals help people to keep their blood pressure in check and things like that. So what she's doing is really changing the community. She has had difficulty getting access to capital for a long time.
Sure.
She had outgrown the shared kitchen space where she was cooking. Just at the end of December, it was like the last week in December, she closed on a building. And that was one of the most amazing things. We were all so excited for her because that's been something that has been a barrier to her growth for so long.
Well, and it's so heartwarming to hear that kind of entrepreneur is out there. I mean, people want to do good things, and the importance of having that funding or the people like yourselves around them to help them kind of work through those challenges is so important. I love that
to stay in business and then to even just navigate this process.
Absolutely.
To navigate the process, there were some legal issues with one of her vendors that she had to address, where she had to try to recover money. And, our attorney resources were able to work with her to help her move through that. So she's utilized a lot of our WOCON Women of Color Connecting resources.
So in that business, because it is, it's hard to see sometimes, I think people don't understand that you can build a wealth building company that is doing good for people. So what do you help her with in thinking through creating her historical wealth opportunity in that company? And wealth not meaning millions and millions of dollars. How does she generate that something could be sold or acquired and she could step out of that business and have a retirement?
Yeah, Jeremy, you did an interview with her. You want to talk about kind of that mindset shift?
Well, that's really an important fact. Really what's interesting is through her experience with WOCON, she really started to see herself as a CEO. Right. So this new perspective from running a business to now I am the chief executive officer.
Right.
And I am going to take this small business and expand it, grow, and then exit. Right. And so that was so important. Really what she talked about is over the last 2 years, she was able to meet with her Success Circle's advisor, so to speak. And that person really had been a sounding board and a source of encouragement, right? When she was unsure of, should I call this person? Shouldn't I call this person? Her advisor really said, go for it.
Yeah.
Don't hold back, go for it.
Right.
This is how things happen. In addition, her advisor enabled her to really go to the next level and get some additional training through a source called a Zingman training. It's adopted worldwide by small businesses, but this entrepreneur got exposed to that concept and approach based on talking to her advisor. So it's really been full circle and just really that mindset shift for her.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And we should also say that they met through our Women of Color Connecting Summit.
Oh, that's awesome.
I believe it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So they met and then they have been meeting weekly on a Thursday morning, I think at 8 a.m. ever since. So that's what the summit is all about. It is creating those connections between the people who need support and the people who have that expertise and support to give and want to, again, put their intentions around diversity, equity, and inclusion into practice, and who really are focused on helping to eradicate the barriers at a systemic level.
Yeah, so you almost have like a mini board of directors that stays with you for the success of your business.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there one other success story you want to share before we end our time?
Another,
I have one entrepreneur that I
yeah,
just
go for
have
it.
to talk about. She is one of the most amazing businesswomen, brilliant mind, wonderful person. Her name is Osahan Ojiega. Her company is Aja Labs. Wolcon was actually able to get her out of the lab and into the business community to start making connections. Her story is just amazing. She's a brilliant scientist. Her product is going to change the world, I promise you that. But it was really the Women of Color Connecting Roadshow that actually got her into the mindset of being a CEO
Oh,
and
yeah.
starting to make connections with other founders and other people that could open doors for her. And just hearing about how much the program was able to help her, it was amazing to see the light come into her eyes when she started talking about it. And her company started during the pandemic, so it was very much a sense of isolation
Yeah,
that she was
absolutely.
feeling in process of creating this wonderful product that she's going to be rolling out very shortly. And it wasn't until she connected with the Women of Color Connecting,
Yeah.
she actually found out about it through a professional associate, and the world just opened up. This brilliant person that has so much to contribute to the world, her world was actually opened up through
That's
the
awesome.
program.
I mean, loneliness is for an entrepreneur one of the most,
That's huge.
things that we hear all the time. It is lonely as an entrepreneur, and having those people around you is so critical. And it's not just those one-off. It's, it's the continual connections that are so important. So, congratulations on what you're doing. I think it's a wonderful thing. I want to make sure we have all the links. Is there anything else you want to share as we wrap up? Anything that I haven't talked about or you guys haven't talked about you want to share?
Yeah, well, we talked a lot about women of color connecting, and that is really a focus for us. I want to make sure we're clear, though, that the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership is broader than that.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so we do have resources and support for small business owners that may not be women, that may not be women of color.
Okay.
Just in general. And
Any
so,
entrepreneur then.
yeah. And so
Okay.
doing the matching resources that we offer, again, support small businesses. This started during COVID, or this was amplified during COVID to
Yeah.
support Main Street type everyday regular businesses.
Sure.
We do focus a lot on communities that have been historically underinvested,
Yeah.
but the resources are available for people in general who feel that they need support, because no matter how much, what level of resource you have,
Right.
it's very difficult to be successful in business. So, I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. And I want to make sure people know too that you exist by funding and donations as a nonprofit.
Yes.
So we'll make sure those links and how to get in touch with you if someone is very passionate and wants to make sure that they can help you continue your success. But congratulations on
Yes,
20
thank you.
years
And
of-
through donations, but also volunteers. We
Yeah,
are continuing to look for volunteers. We have lots and lots of opportunities. So anyone who has business expertise in any area, things that they do on a day-to-day basis, they can take those skills and use them to make a difference.
Well, and I mentioned you were based in New Jersey, but you work all over the US, correct? I mean, it's entrepreneurs anywhere.
Yeah, a lot of our work is done virtually, and we were doing that pre-COVID,
Right.
amplified, and more people got in tune with it by the virtual world. But yes, most of it is virtual. So we are very happy to accept people from wherever they are in the world and create that opportunity for them to make a difference.
Well, Jill, Jeremy, Lorianne, thank you so much for joining me today. I am thrilled to hear of all the work you're doing. I think it's an important organization and important support needed. So thank you for that. And I will say goodbye for now, but we'll continue our talks.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
You're
so
very
much.
welcome. You're welcome.
Don't forget, hashtag inclusion must be intentional.
Okay, we'll remember that. We'll put that in our notes too.